Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, I'm going to show you my Flow Hive harvesting workflow. I'm going to show you how to inspect flow hives and the harvesting tips and tricks you need to know. We're going to look at what happens to a flow frame when it's harvested outside of the hive and what happens when you harvest a flow frame that is uncapped. From the things we learned in this video, I develop a new way of harvesting honey from a flow hive and some additional tools to help you manage your flow workflow. So here I have two rather active flow style hives. On your right is the flow hive and on your left is the auto frame fake flow. These were both nucleuses in November of last year. So it's been about 10 months. And in that time, I've harvested it 3 or 4 times. And in those 3 or 4 times, I've discovered that it's not just a matter of opening up the window and cracking the frames that look full. I want to talk to you about preparations for harvesting flow hives. In a lot of the flow harvesting videos, the person harvesting will inspect the flow frames by opening the front of the hive like so, and you'll see that the flow frames look like they're completely full at the front here. However, this can actually be quite deceiving. Let me throw on a bee suit and show you what I mean. If we have a look at the front of this hive, most of our windows look like they're full. These 3 in the middle especially. So what I want to do is I want to take these frames out and show you how full they are and how the front window isn't indicative of the entire frame. Okay, I'm just going to lift the lid and I'll give them a bit of a smoke. So this is what I would suggest that flow beekeepers do. You will need to check on the state of your frames by pulling the frames out of your hive, and I'll give you a quick demonstration of how I do that. So what you want to first do is smoke in the entrance of the hive. After you've taken your top off, it's a lot easier on the auto frame because it has this screened top. With the standard flow, you would just lift your top up. But I can just smoke into that so that the bees will start to move down and away from the smoke. And you can see that all the bees have started to move away now. This is going to make sure that when you open it, they're not all just going to rise up at you. So we'll just take the top off like so. And now we want to remove our frames. With the flow hive, it's actually a lot easier because you can get a J hook under them. But with the auto frame, I'm just going to lever the frames up. They will have been stuck down really nicely by the bees. Then I'm going to get my J hook underneath the frame and sort of pull the frame out like so. One hand, and then we can just slide it up and have a look at that frame. That is almost completely full. That is the middle frame, and there is only a small section down the bottom that has not been capped. This is the state of the front of the frame. As you can see, it's nicely filled out internally, and we have a really nice full flow frame. Because I know this frame is now full, I've come up with a system of identifying full frames, and that is you would just remove the front cap, and that is going to indicate that this frame is full when you put it back in. This saves you having to remember which frame to harvest and not to harvest. Now, for those people who are 3D printers in the audience and want to go a step further, we can actually 3D print ourselves the front cap. I've designed this so that you can print them if you lose them or if you want to have them in colors. And these caps just fit into our auto frame at the front like so, and that indicates to you that the frame is ready for harvest once the girls have calmed down and you want to come and harvest a nice calm hive. Now, these caps are actually fantastic for people that have lost their auto frame caps or have a hard time finding them when they drop them on the ground because they are clear. So this allows you to print them in whatever color you like. And I've also made these for the genuine flow hive as well, as they are a slightly different shape to the ones in the auto frame. So I've given you the option for using colored marker caps or replacement color caps for both the authentic flow frames as well as our auto frame. Okay, so I've marked that one for harvest. I'm just gonna put that aside for a second and we'll have a look at the others. So this one looks ready for harvest. However, you can see that the bottom cells, they aren't capped. And what will happen if you harvest this one is that the honey will run down, and it's possible that it will run out the uncapped cells at the bottom. It's possible that I'd like to leave this one a little bit longer. I'm just gonna make that decision in a second. I wanna have a look at the other frames. Okay, so this one is quite interesting because it looks almost completely capped at the front, but it is, God, it's close to being fully capped. These guys have really filled this out. It's so close to being fully capped. These are all pretty much ready to be harvested, which is just crazy. Okay, so I've identified 4 frames that I believe are ready to be harvested. And I've got my green plugs in the front so I can see which ones they are. And when I come back tomorrow, we'll know which ones to harvest. Into the center, I'm adding a virgin frame. And this is because I'm actually going to show you a harvest of a full frame on one side and an uncapped frame on the other, so I can give you an idea of what happens when you harvest a frame all at once and when it's uncapped, not fully ready to be harvested. So we're just gonna have a look. Just gonna try and get these bees off. And I'm gonna put this pre-waxed virgin frame back in our hive. I'll just make sure all of the cells are closed, yes. And we can close the hive up now. All right, so here we have our fully capped frame and half uncapped frame. And I'm going to crack it and show you what happens when the frame is cracked and the cells aren't fully capped over. I haven't actually done this before outside of the hive, so I'm quite interested to see how it goes. So now that I'm about to crack the frame, I'm actually going to go over a couple of things that people can get wrong in a flow harvest while I'm harvesting this. One thing that people may not do in a flow harvest is have their flow hive on an angle. So between 3 and 5 degrees, and this allows the honey to run forward and out of the tap at the front. It creates a slope for the honey to run down. And without that slope, what happens is once you crack the frame, the honey will start to run down, but because the pipe's full and can't empty as fast, it will actually try to escape through the sides of the frame and down over the top of your bees. And that's wasting honey, wasting the girl's time, and it can cause a disturbance in the hive. So just make sure that your hive is on an angle. You can leave it on that angle if you like. The bees don't mind if the hive's on an angle. In fact, the hives are designed that way. So we're gonna remove our plug at the front. Now, when cracking the frame, you really only want to crack half at a time or sections at a time to give the honey time to escape the frame so that it doesn't all fall out. Now, what I'm interested in seeing is if we crack it a small amount at a time, even with the open cells, will we get the honey escaping from the open cells? Is that something that I need to be worried about? We're gonna answer that question. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just insert the key in about a quarter of the way and crack it, and then we'll see how our cells respond being as full as they are and still open. So you can see here, our cells are like almost fully capped, but not capped over. So I'm very interested to see how they respond. How far do we want to go? We want to go about that far. So go that far in. Second key. And you should see the channels start to shift alignment. So here we go. Just starting to crack now. and we have honey starting to flow through. Just waiting to see if we've got any honey escaping from the front. We have honey escaping from this side, which is strange, but it is dripping through. Interestingly, we haven't had any honey escaping on this side. There is a little bit here, but we have got a full flow coming out the front. Interestingly, this side is actually leaking more than our uncapped side. Now, a theory in my head about that is that the uncapped side might be letting the honey escape because the air is able to get into it. And that is quite interesting, actually. You can see how it's working. See how all of the cells are unaligned? And on this side, we have a little bit of dripping out, but not too much. But you can see, actually here, see how this wax is wider? That's because it's empty of honey. And most of that wax on the sides is keeping the honey from escaping, and it's just draining down. Now there is a few little drips, but I'm not particularly worried about those. Another consideration over on this side is if you have open cells, it's possible that the bees will be in them when you crack them. Now, when they're this full, it's highly unlikely that the bees are going to be in right deep in the cell where they're going to get harmed. So I wouldn't be too worried about cracking a frame like this. As you can see, we're not really losing much honey out of this uncapped side. And because it's so fully capped, I'm actually not too worried about the water content. And you can see right up that frame and how it's just all dripping down. Incredible. Okay, so now what I want to do is a worst case scenario. Someone decides to crack the entire frame at once. So all of this is going to be running down into the base channel. Let's have a look at what that does to the functioning of the frame all the way down the back. This is going to be 3/4 of a frame cracked, with this front part not even completely drained out as well. Fully crack, ready, set, go. It's actually not easy to do this, but here we go, all at once. All right, you can see immediately that we have some leaking on this side, and it's leaking out of not even where the uncapped cells are, it's leaking out of the cap cells. So we have some there on our other side. Yeah, we have a little bit of leaking. But you know what? That channel's not even completely full on the side. So if you have a look, you can see up that channel. It's not completely full. You can see how much honey is coming out of that. It's just absolutely pouring out. And over this side, it's actually not too bad. You know, I thought there'd be a lot more. This is actually the fully capped side, and just even these little bits of uncapping are letting some honey out, but not much, as you can see, and the bees will just clean that up. There's a little bit over this side, but as you can see, most of it is actually collecting and going down into our collection pipe. So this is actually quite a surprising result for me, and I am very impressed that this can still function with the cells open, albeit almost completely capped. This has given me a bunch of confidence about cracking frames that aren't completely capped. I was very worried about flooding the beehive with honey. This has actually put a lot of my worries to bed. The amount of spillage out of these frames is not anything that the bees can't just lick up and store again. And that is actually quite impressive. I am very happy that this is the case. Now, I should stress that you really should wait for the frames to be mostly capped, because that is a sign that the honey has been reduced to below 18% water content, and it means that the honey won't ferment. Now that all the honey has drained out of our frame, we can reset the honeycomb matrix. So to reset the frame, we just take out our keys and we put them into the top slot, and you can do half at a time if you don't have much strength. So we just, as I turn this, you'll see that the honeycomb lines back up. So, like so. And there we are. All of our cells are in alignment. Replace our caps. Because this one's obviously outside the hive, I can give this one a bit of a helping hand to drain the rest of that honey out, and we can replace our cap at the front, like so. And you can see on this side that was fully capped, all of our cappings remain because the way that these cells move over each other, the internal cell that slides is actually recessed. So the cappings remain in place once you've cracked it, and now the girls will come along and start to uncap the cells and refill them. Now, for those people with multiple flow hives, if you have a virgin flow super, this would be a really good time to swap some old flow frames into the new flow super and some new flow frames into the old flow super. And that way you can add your flow frames onto a new hive and they will accept it readily because it's full of honey and wax. So the bees will make their way really fast into a new flow super with a couple of old frames in it. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to add this frame into a new flow super. This flow super has not been used much by the bees. So I want to encourage them up into the super so that I start to get honey up and out of the brood box. So I'm just going to smoke these guys away, take the top off, remove one of our sections, and there is a little bit of honey being stored in this one actually, as you can see. I'm going to try and coax them up a little bit more, so I'm going to drop this one in, like so. Perfect. Okay, so that's fantastic. We can harvest while the frames are mostly capped. And that means that I can put these on a bunch of hives and not worry about them spilling honey through the hive and onto them if I were to harvest a bunch of frames pretty much all at once. And that takes it a step further towards being a commercially viable way of harvesting honey. If we can get these supers cheap enough, which we can because we can DIY our own supers, we could theoretically have them on top of all our hives and harvest in one big batch. Now, the only thing standing in front of this is having a container large enough that you can harvest multiple frames at a time. And that's why I've designed these. These are an adaptation of my mason jar lids. And the way that they work is you can print them off on a 3D printer and then they will stack as many in a row as you like. So say you had a 20-litre honey pail. This is perfect for collecting a full flow hive. And what we would do is print off our collectors and we can arrange them at the front of our bucket. Now, obviously this is going to work way better with a square bucket because you're not going to have as much distance between the interface and the hive, but this is what I've got available to me at the moment. And I'm just going to reduce the amount of these and that will get me in closer to the hive front. What we do now is we take a hole saw. This is 2/7/8, which is 73mm hole saw. And that's what I've made these two. And we're gonna drill holes in the lid so that we can slide these into the lid of our bucket and they will move up and down. Now I've obviously spaced these the perfect distance apart to accept the Flow Hive's outlets. So we're just gonna mark around them and we drill that out. Starting forwards and in reverse. And we can test it. And there we have a flow collector. How good. And the way that this works is obviously you just raise or lower these three up to or down to your flow height. And now you can crack your frames into your bucket. Obviously, if you have a bucket the size of the front of the flow, there's no limit to how many of these you can have in a row cracked all at once. Okay, so you can see here that I've got my bucket just resting on top of a 3D printable nucleus that I covered in a recent video. Any object will do, obviously. This is just really easy for me to carry around because it's quite light. So I've got it roughly at about where I think the flow tubes are going to come out, and we can do a full harvest on this hive now. As you can see at the top, we've got our marked frames that are ready for collection. Now, I'm not collecting the middle one, but the middle one is just going to block the third unused pipe that I've got here. And I'm only going to be cracking these two because they're my marked frames. So I can move my bucket in closer and these will just adjust to the height of the pipes. Make sure they're pushed all the way in. And now we can go about cracking our frames. So we just remove our plugs like so, and we can crack our frames and they will run down into our bucket. And these won't touch the honey at all. The honey is going to drop straight through our prints and not touch the print surface. So there's no need for them to be food safe, although they are made of a food safe material. So just because I'm not in a rush, I'm actually just going to crack half the frame like so, and again half this frame like so. And then I can come back in about 10 or 20 minutes and crack the other half of the frame. But as you can see, we've got honey running down into our tubes and into our honey bucket already. And I'll see if I can get you inside the bucket. I'm not sure if this will work. There we go, we've got honey collecting at the bottom. And as you can see, it just runs straight down and into our bucket, like so. So I'm really happy with how that worked. The frames are now drained and I'm going to move on to my second frames. The level of the honey is just above our tap. So that's how much I got from those two frames. If you were to collect all 7 of the frames, so that's 2, 4, 6, 7. So you're going to get about 15 liters, and that's pretty much perfect for this size bucket. Just quickly reset these frames. And instead of replacing the green caps, I'm just going to replace with the clear because they're already harvested. I can remove our honey tubes and just have them sitting in my collection pipes. Move this back and replace our caps. We can just move our bucket across to the new frames that we want to collect, remove our caps, push our bucket back in with our pipes. Remove our 2 green indicators and crack both of our frames half at a time. Now, do I think that this style of collection should replace you enjoying your flow hive by sitting down with family and friends and collecting jars of honey? No, I don't. I think that this is a practical way of managing swarming if your hive is getting too full and you are time poor, because not every weekend is going to be a flow collection weekend. Or for those people with grandkids that want to give them that special experience of collecting from a flow hive, your grandkids aren't going to be there every time you need to collect. And if you have any number of flow hives, you can get a lot of honey from a single hive. I've collected this hive 3 or 4 times now, and that collection process can be quite tedious if you are collecting in smaller jars. So this gives you a bulk collection option if you want to quickly drain your hive in the spring and summer months because it's just getting outrageously full. And it does happen. Like this hive, I've been collecting 3 or 4 times over winter, which is just ridiculous. So being able to collect like this over the spring and summer months is going to be invaluable for me. I'm actually going to try and find a container wide enough that I can collect all frames at once, or maybe even 4 or 5. Now, you shouldn't collect all of the honey in the winter months, but because it's the first day of spring here and these girls are getting very busy. So this is kind of even swarm management in a way. And I'm just gonna crack the second half of both of these, like so. And there it is. That is my Flow Hive harvesting workflow. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hoochos. All of these files are available on my Patreon as usual. Happy beekeeping, and I will see you next time on Hoochos. I should probably give you a peek into how much honey I've collected. Look at that. That's crazy. We're up to here. Oh, fantastic.